Chapter 2. Introduction to the Cages. After weeks of dallying, Shauna finally loses her patience with me and drags me to the cages so that we can start off our bet. I suppose it was rather petty of me to keep putting it off until the week before school started. The Cages shopping district is almost exclusively for mage familiars and pets, a distinction that still eludes me. Many of the surrounding vendors sell equipment for familiars as well, clothes and collars along with other items that I really can't distinguish at the pace that Shauna pulls me along. It still baffles me to watch people leading around their familiars and pets, which look more human than not. The only real difference is in their animalistic features, the ears, tails, wings, and horns, that show what their true nature is. After all, everyone knows that familiars are entirely animalistic, only ever looking humanoid. Shauna leads with practiced ease through stalls and vendors, all the way out to the central market. Once we get out to the courtyard, rows and rows of cages come into view. Idly, a part of my brain is satisfied to learn how the name of the marketplace had come about. These iron monstrosities are stacked up in layers on top of each other, arranging themselves into high-walled paths in an extensive labyrinth. At first, nothing truly notable catches my attention. The cages themselves have quite a few familiars in them. There are probably too many to be truly comfortable given the cage space, but I suppose they're removed often enough that it probably doesn't matter. The people who run this place know better than me. Some of the exceptionally rare breeds have their own cages, and the pretty ones get colorful accessories in an attempt to pull in a buyer. Some of the best stock is not available for private sale, only available at the auction during the night. A guard wanders over and tells us that he can help us if we want a familiar in a stacked cage. My eyes appraise the options on the lower rungs while Shauna takes her time chatting with the guard, probably explaining her situation and what exactly she wants. She's always been good at that, in a way that I could never hope to accomplish. There's a shift in the familiars, so subtle and melded into the innocuous background that I almost don't notice. They shift away when the guard gets closer, scuttling to opposite sides of their cramped little cages as he passes them. The chittering quiets when he is near, and they all watch. I know what it is like to be watched, the feeling of eyes upon you. Apparently, the guard does not. But as he moves around with Shauna, the familiars look away when he looks up. None of them meet his eyes. They simply become mildly more interested in their feet and pick at the straps of their simple sandals. Suddenly, I am very distinctly not comfortable. Shauna, I have never been here before, and I don't really know what I was expecting. But whatever it was, it sure as hell wasn't this. Shauna has already gone off on her own, stepping up to the cages and appraising her options. "Yeah?" she calls back to me distractedly. She doesn't bother looking up. You pick something out for you, okay? I'll be right back so we can pick something out together for me. All right?" "Sure," she calls back as she raps her knuckles against the iron bars, making a clanging sound that immediately repels the cage's 4 occupants. "Just don't wander off too far. You are not getting out of this that easily." I don't even hear my own response as I walk away. I try not to draw any attention to myself as I attempt to calm my sudden jitters by wandering through the streets on my own. Eventually, I start ducking into shops as I begin to feel more adventurous. Apparently, my lack of experience is readily visible to anyone who might even just be casually watching, because vendors start offering assistance and explanations for what I'm fairly certain are everyday items necessary for dealing with familiars. As I wander around, casually looking over different items, I find myself accruing various objects. A few vendors offer training manuals and collars, while others offer more daunting implements. Canes, whips, and muzzles are on display in the front of one of the stalls, leaving me very unwilling to venture inside. But the vendor waves me forward, seemingly unfazed by my trepidation. He introduces himself as Kasuk, a slim, middle-aged, heavily accented man who carries himself like a very refined businessman. At the least, he has none of the sloppy markings of a street vendor. The shop is a cool balm to the chaos of the outside vendors. Rich colors and fabrics set the interior of his store apart, the air clean and light, not like the other specialty shops saturated in incense.
"My friend,"
his R's roll playfully and vowels stretch.
"You seem to find yourself a bit lost, I think."
I hate the way the color goes to my face as I admit that he's correct. I came to the market to find a familiar, but don't even know the first thing about the equipment that I'm going to need.
I see, I see. I specialize more in equipment for pets, but there is very little difference in their actual needs. If you would like me to explain some of these pieces to you, he offers gently, and honestly, I'm just happy to find someone who won't talk down to me. He shows me a variety of bondage gear and fetish equipment. That much I recognize on my own. Despite what Shauna says about me, I am not a prude, and I am familiar with this style of pleasure, the tenuous line of pleasure and pain. However, I am not quite sure how it applies to the familiar that I will need to train. Turning the corner in his show, we see some of his equipment currently being modeled by smaller familiars. They seem startlingly okay with being locked into place without someone monitoring them. But then again, maybe this shop just uses this equipment because it is safe and tested. Using other materials for binding and restraining a pet might prove dangerous, and I appreciate the safeguards this place takes. This way, you know. A rather busty rabbit familiar takes center stage in the shop. Bound to a wooden-looking bench, gagged and scantily, provocatively clad, she cranes her neck up at the store owner as he passes before wiggling her hips the inch and a half that she can, trying to be enticing. Kasuk shows me some of his gags and inserts before sheepishly admitting that he does not have the extensive collection of his competitors, but he has a vastly superior quality of items. The implements that he had already shown me made me more than a bit concerned. I might know a little bit about this stuff, but what more could there even really be? On second thought, I've already learned a lot today. Maybe it is best not to know. Hey, what's that? I ask, just loud enough to get the man's attention over to the corner of the shop that I'm gesturing to. Oh, well, I see that you are a man of fine tastes, he says, walking over to the indicated wall and pulling down a row of artfully designed soft leather collars. I got these from Davenport on the North Isle. They're made from an exceptionally soft leather with a fancy little design piece to suit your tastes. Quite a good reward for a pet.
It is?
Why, yes, of course. He chuckles warmly before continuing. I could tell that you were new around these parts, but you've never had a pet of your own before, have you?
I can feel the blush rising on my face. Why does everything have to be so complicated? I've never actually had a familiar. Neither has my family. I need one for classes, so one of my friends brought me down here to get one at the same time as her. She said that she'd help me as soon as she was done, so I wanted to check out what kinds of things I would need for my new familiar. But right now I am just completely and utterly lost. Kasuk nods along with my story, thankfully unbothered by the fact that I'm ranting to him about my problems.
Well, let me give you some advice. I am sure you know that most first familiars don't last. You have no care experience. This goes doubly for you. It is difficult to find the right balance between care and discipline to have a truly good familiar.
He pets the bunny lightly on the head, and she keens, bringing her head closer to his hands in the desired petting.
Secondly, you should probably go find your friend. I know myself, my friend, and I talk far too much. You have been kind and indulged my ramblings, but your friend? I can nearly guarantee that she is done by now. Market handlers try to make sure anybody who needs something is attended to.
He nods emphatically, as if to agree with himself.
Yes, your friend is almost certainly done by now. Anyway, if you keep going the direction you are headed, you are going to find your way into the clothing district.
He shakes his head, sounding concerned.
I'm warning you now, you do not want to get clothes for a familiar before you know how big or small your familiar is, or which assets you'd like to put on display. The wink is implied, as we both take a second-long glance back at the bunny.
He takes a moment to turn slightly, gesturing back at his shop.
You aren't really going to need most of the things that I have in my shop while you are starting out. Once you get your pet, for you, familiar, settled in at your home, you'll be in a better place to tell what you need, whether that's some attitude-shifting bondage or something to plug them up while you're away. Although you may want to take home a light flogger with you, just in case your little creature wants to start its time off with you by misbehaving. From there, it is really as simple as figuring out what you want to do and what you like to do. Does that give you a better picture of what's going on?
I breathe a sigh of relief as he finishes. This is the most comprehensive explanation that I have received so far, and it does wonders to put me at ease. There are things that I need to learn, simple as that. It is only through learning and gathering experience that this will get easier, just like magic. I buy a small riding crop from the man, as well as a soft brown leather collar with a shiny blue bell. He gives me his card and sends me on my way as another person steps into his shop. The 2 items fit easily enough into my satchel, and I start backtracking, stopping here and there at merchants that I had only glanced at before. By the time I find Shauna again, I have a slightly too thick general care book and a few different types of treat bites that I was assured every pet would love, even though to me they smell awful. Shauna doesn't come to me empty-handed either, as she is trailed by a wide-shouldered bear familiar, if his stubbly tail and brown, soft, rounded ears have anything to say about it. I'm not the best at identifying breeds, but I can identify the basics. He seems sturdy, and I can't help but hope that he'll make it. Kara! There you are! She bounds over to me, the bear familiar trying to match her speed with longer strides. Come on now, she says, taking my arm in hers. Let's find you something.
Right.
I try to match her enthusiasm as she leads me in. It doesn't take long for Shauna to find and corner an older woman in a pantsuit with a name tag. The woman doesn't have a single hair out of place as she turns to address my bouncing, excited companion. How may I help you, miss? My friend here is getting his first familiar. Would you mind too terribly helping us? The soft pout and sickeningly sweet tone that Shauna uses is familiar to me. It's the voice she uses to get her what she wants without a fuss. Oh, yes, of course. The attendant steps closer as she focuses her gaze on me. I'll take you to that section now. Section? I can't help but ask for a bit of clarity. Why do we need to go to a different section? There are plenty of familiars around us. Oh, silly me. She blushes as she begins leading us through a maze of turns and aisles. New owners aren't given peak condition products. Caring for a familiar is quite difficult work. You see, it is a careful rule of thumb that a new owner will end up killing the first few items they take in. By giving you old or damaged goods, you will have a chance to learn and get some experience before trying on worthwhile items. And we at the market have less of those yucky corpses that we have to deal with ourselves.
Oh, I say softly. It's all I can think of to say. I'm not quite sure what to think of her explanation, or the way she smiled cheerfully through it. As we continue walking, I notice a distinct downward trend in sanitation standards as the familiars in the cages grow increasingly more filthy the closer we get to the back. In the front, the area had been a bit crowded, but it was clean and representative of the good breeding and health of the stock they offered. By the time our attendant stops us, there is no denying the miasmic scent of urine and filth. Just turning my head, I can see a variety of different familiars, each bruised and roughed up, covered in grime, ducking their heads respectfully as they try to pull their tattered and ill-fitting canvas clothing to make themselves look somewhat presentable. None of them have the floppy sandals that some in the front had. They are thinner and more frail-looking, too. Some don't even bother to hide the fact that they are crying, tears cutting clean tracks into their faces. I remember a lecture that I had to sit through about the strategic importance of fear, how it was used to hold attention, decipher the intentions of the room, win wars, give control. Never before in my life have I known a professor to be as completely wrong as I now know this lecturer to have been. The fear, palpable in the room, makes me nauseous and weak. It's almost physically painful to look at them. So instead, I bring my gaze up to Shauna. Help? I manage without letting my voice crack, as if I were just innocently asking a friend to help me pick out a shade of wallpaper. Well, we did decide that it had to be one of low constitution. Weakest by far are the common cats and the flugel canaries. Do you have any of those? Shauna asks, turning to the guide. The attendant gives a small, almost unnoticeable frown. I do believe we have a common cat variety here, but I seriously cannot give it any form of recommendation. It will most likely not last the week. Maybe one more channeling spell before he is no longer serviceable. We might be getting a flugel canary in the next quarter's shipment, but I can't say that I'd recommend that one either. Shauna smiles wickedly back at me. We promised! Looks like you're getting a kitty cat.